I'm Brooke Thompson, 29 years old, and I was exactly 43 minutes late to my parents' 32nd anniversary dinner when my world imploded. After rushing through downtown Milwaukee, she slid an itemized bill across the white tablecloth. $1,720. My portion of the celebration, she explained with a tight smile, plus a few outstanding debts. My hands trembled as I realized my family had finished more than just dinner. They'd finished with me. If you're watching this from somewhere where family drama is all too familiar, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments if your parents have ever blindsided you like mine did. Trust me, this story goes places even I couldn't have imagined. To understand why a bill shattered my world that night, you need to know about the Thompsons. We weren't just any family from suburban Milwaukee. We were the family with the Tudor-style house on Maple Avenue, the family with the European vacations every summer. Success wasn't just encouraged in our household, it was the baseline expectation. I grew up sandwiched between two siblings who had no problem meeting those expectations. My older brother Ryan, now 34, followed our father's footsteps directly into business school and then law school. He now works for one of Milwaukee's top corporate firms, drives a Tesla, and lives in a lakeside condo that costs more than most people make in a year. My younger sister Melissa, 26, took after our mother, poised, practical, and perfect in every measurable way. She got her MBA by 24 and now works as a financial consultant, already on track for partner. Then there was me, the creative middle child who preferred sketchbooks to spreadsheets. I wasn't rebellious in the traditional sense. I didn't sneak out at night or get caught with cigarettes behind the school. My rebellion was quieter but, to my parents, somehow worse. I held my ground. I applied to art schools instead of business programs, and after numerous arguments that left my mother in tears and my father in stony silence, they relented, with conditions. They would pay for my education at the Chicago Institute of Art, but I would need to focus on practical applications like graphic design. I would need to maintain a 3.8 GPA, and I would need to secure internships every summer. "We're investing in your future," my father explained while signing the first tuition check. "Investments need to show returns." Landed a position at a respected design agency in Chicago, and started building my client portfolio. But 3 years in, the agency downsized and I made a decision that changed everything. I decided to go freelance. "You're throwing away stability," my mother said during one of our increasingly infrequent phone calls. "You're throwing away your potential." My father added in the background. They didn't say they were throwing away their support, but the temperature of our relationship dropped several degrees. Holiday visits became exercises in tension, with my career choice dissected over turkey and stuffing. My siblings' promotions and bonuses were celebrated with champagne. My new clients were acknowledged with tight nods and quick subject changes. 7 years after graduation at 29, I was still fighting to make it work in Chicago. I was down to my last 2 reliable clients when a major opportunity appeared. A chance to redesign the entire visual identity for a growing tech company. The initial meeting was scheduled for the afternoon of my parents' anniversary, but I couldn't reschedule. This contract could literally save my career. Her voice carried that familiar disappointment. "But we're used to accommodating your choices." I should have recognized the warning signs. The way she emphasized choices like it was a dirty word. The fact that this year, unlike previous anniversaries, I hadn't been consulted about my contribution to the dinner cost. The strained way she said, "We'll see you when you get there," before hanging up. But I was focused on landing the tech client. On finally proving to my family that my career path could be successful on its own terms. I spent extra hours preparing my portfolio, researching the company, and creating preliminary mock-ups to impress them. The meeting ran long because it was going well, really well. The marketing director loved my concepts, asked thoughtful questions, realizing I was now running 40 minutes late for a dinner that my punctuality-obsessed father had undoubtedly timed to start precisely at 7 p.m. I texted my sister while power walking to my car. "Running late. Meeting went great. Start without me." Her reply was brief. "Already did. Dad's not happy." As I navigated evening traffic toward Morton's Steakhouse, I would be facing a bill that itemized exactly how much my family thought I was worth. Morton's Steakhouse occupied the first floor of a restored historical building in downtown Milwaukee. Its exterior of dark brick and subtle signage conveyed exactly what waited inside. Old money, quiet power, and expectations as starched as the white tablecloths. As I hurried through the heavy wooden doors at 7:43 p.m., the maitre d' gave me a look that suggested my breathlessness was disturbing the carefully cultivated atmosphere. The maitre d' led me through the dining room, past tables of couples celebrating anniversaries of their own, business associates closing deals, and families marking special occasions. Every table seemed to radiate a harmony that made me acutely aware of the discord I was about to enter. Our table was in a semi-private alcove near the back. My father always requested privacy, hating the idea of strangers overhearing family conversations. As I approached, I took in the tableau. My father at the head of the table, checking his watch. My mother beside him, her posture perfect even after 2 hours of sitting. Ryan across from her, swirling the remains of what was undoubtedly an expensive red wine. And Melissa, whose eyes met mine first with a warning I couldn't quite interpret. "There she is," my father announced, his voice carrying just enough edge to make a nearby server glance over sympathetically. 43 minutes late to her parents' 32nd anniversary. "I'm so sorry," I said, leaning down to kiss my mother's cheek. She turned her face at the last moment, so my lips brushed her hair instead. "The meeting ran long, but it went really well. We saved you some filet," Melissa offered, gesturing to a covered plate at my empty seat. "Though it's probably cold by now." 43 minutes cold, Ryan added with a smirk, topping off his wine. I slid into my chair, feeling like I was 16 again and had broken curfew. "I really am sorry, but this client could be huge for me. They want to contract me for a complete rebrand, and the initial offer they mentioned is more than I made all last year." I expected at least a flicker of interest, maybe even approval. Instead, my mother touched her napkin to her lips and said, "Time management," my father said, as if concluding a thought he'd been developing during my absence. "It's the cornerstone of success in any field." Before I could respond, a server appeared with a chocolate soufflé, my parents' traditional anniversary dessert. The rich aroma of dark chocolate briefly distracted from the tension as the server deftly placed it in the center of the table. "It looks amazing," I offered, trying to steer us towards safer conversational waters. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. 32 years is incredible." My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, 32 years of commitment, responsibility, and accountability. Values we've always tried to instill in our children. The emphasis on responsibility and accountability carried a weight I should have recognized sooner. As the server departed, my father raised his glass. "To 32 years, he said. Everyone clinked glasses, even mine, though it contained only water since I'd missed the wine service. "You know," Ryan said as we placed our glasses down, "I was just telling Mom and Dad about the partnership track opening up at the firm. 2 years ahead of schedule." "That's great," I said automatically, though I'd heard about nothing else during our last 3 family gatherings. "And Melissa has news too," my mother prompted, beaming at my younger sister. Melissa straightened, her engagement ring catching the light as she adjusted her posture. "I've been approved for the executive leadership program. Only 10 people from the entire company were selected." "That's really impressive, Mel," I said, and meant it. Despite the familiar dance we were performing, my siblings' achievements spotlighted while my career remained a conversational footnote. "What about you, Brooke?" my father asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer wouldn't measure up. "Besides this potential client, how is the freelancing going?" I took a breath, determined to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. "It's been challenging, especially with inflation and the post-pandemic market. But this new client could change everything. I just needed to get through this rough patch." "Rough patch," Ryan echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling the last 3 years?" Something in his tone made me put down my fork, his voice dropping into the register he used for serious financial discussions. My mother nodded and reached for her purse, a cream-colored Prada that had been my father's anniversary gift to her. For a moment, I thought she might be reaching for an anniversary card they wanted me to sign, or perhaps photos they wanted to show. Instead, she pulled out a folded paper, crisp and official looking. With perfectly manicured fingers, She unfolded it and slid it across the tablecloth toward me. "What's this?" asked, though something in my stomach was already clenching with dread. "It's time for some accountability, Brooke," my mother said, her voice gentle but her eyes hard. "It's an itemized statement of what you owe us." I looked down at the paper, my vision briefly swimming before the numbers came into focus. At the bottom, circled in my father's precise handwriting, $1,720. "I don't understand," I said, though the horrible truth was dawning with each passing second. My mother smiled thinly. "It's time you understood what your choices have cost this family." The itemized bill in front of me was typed in my father's preferred font Times New Roman 12 point, with the same meticulous formatting he used for his most important client invoices. Each line represented a different debt, calculated down to the penny. Car repair, December 2024, $742.88. Emergency rent assistance, March 2025, $600. 00. Loan for new design software, June 2024, $299.99. Your portion of tonight's anniversary dinner, $77.13. And the final item which made my blood run cold. Administrative fee for financial management, $0, waived family courtesy. Administrative fee? I whispered, looking up from the paper. "You're charging me a fee?" "We waived it," my mother pointed out, as if that was the part one should be grateful for. My father cleared his throat. "This is actually considerably less than what you actually owe us, Brooke. We didn't include any of the major investments, your education, your first apartment's security deposit, the starter car we provided. Those were gifts," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You never said I needed to pay those back." Ryan let out a short laugh. "Did you really think they were gifts? Nothing in this family comes without expectations of return." I turned to him, shock giving way to a rising anger. "You knew about this?" "Of course," he said, swirling his wine. But she avoided my eyes. "Melissa too?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your sister understood the arrangement without us having to spell it out," my mother said. "You never said my education was a loan." "We shouldn't have had to spell it out," my father replied, his disappointment palpable. "Successful children want to pay back their parents' investment. As your father said, we're not including the major expenses. This is just to help you understand the concept of financial responsibility." I stared at the bill again. "Brooke, we're actually giving you a family discount compared to market rates. The real world doesn't pretend to help you out of love, and then send you a bill for it," I said, my voice cracking. An uncomfortable silence fell over our table. From nearby, I could hear the cheerful conversation of another family celebrating something, their laughter creating a painful contrast to our tension. "Maybe include it as a line item on the next bill." Ryan sighed dramatically. "And this is exactly why we didn't tell her sooner," he said to my parents, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "She's always been too emotional about money." "I'm not emotional about money," I shot back. "I'm emotional about discovering my family has been keeping a secret ledger of my worth." "That's not what this is," my father said, though his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been calculating the exact dollar amount of your love." My mother's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous, Brooke. This has nothing to do with love. It's about responsibility. Your siblings understood that their success would naturally include repaying what was invested in them. So my value to this family is tied to my financial success?" asked, a horrible clarity beginning to dawn. "Of course not," my father said, but his quick glance at my mother betrayed him. "Yes, it is," I whispered, years of subtle comments and disappointed sighs suddenly making perfect sense. "That's why nothing I achieve ever measures up. You're not proud of me because my career doesn't pay enough for me to reimburse you." Melissa finally spoke up, her voice small. "It's not like that, Brooke. Mom and Dad just want us to be successful." "Successful by whose definition?" I interrupted. "Because I was excited about this new client until about 2 minutes ago. I was proud of the work I did to land them. But that doesn't matter in this family, does it?" The only thing that matters is whether my bank account is big enough to pay back my existence. Now you're just being dramatic, Ryan said with an eye roll. Am I? I looked around the table at these people I'd called family my entire life. Then tell me, if I never make enough money to pay you back, what happens? Do you disown me? Write me off as a bad investment? The silence that followed was deafening. My father finally broke it. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. My financial obligations, I repeated slowly, to the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. Brooke, sit down. My mother hissed, glancing around at nearby tables. You're making a scene. No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I'm making a discovery. I just realized my family sees me as a financial liability, not a daughter. And with that, I picked up the bill, folded it carefully, and placed it in my pocket. Then I walked away from the table. My family, and the illusion that their love had ever been freely given. The night air hit my face like a shock as I pushed through Morton's heavy doors, needing the walk to my car to compose myself. Once inside my Honda Civic, a far cry from Ryan's Tesla or Melissa's Audi, I finally let the tears come. Each dollar amount a tangible measure of my family's conditional love. My phone buzzed with incoming texts. I knew without looking that they would be from my mother. I silenced the phone without checking. Instead, I started the car and pulled into traffic with no destination in mind. The streets of Milwaukee blurred past as memories flooded back. Moments I'd dismissed or rationalized that now appeared in a harsh new light. The time my father had given me $200 for a textbook in college, then casually asked a week later if I'd managed my finances well enough to repay him yet. I thought it was a joke. The Christmas my parents had gifted Ryan a Rolex, but given me a gift card to an art supply store with a note that said, "For investments that pay dividends." I thought they were being supportive of my art in their own way. The countless times my mother had offered financial help during my lean months, always followed by pointed questions about my exit strategy from this struggling artist phase. It had never been support. It had been loans with invisible terms, investments with expected returns, transactions disguised as generosity. I pulled into an empty parking lot and checked my bank account on my phone. The balance stared back at me. $2,437.92. Enough to cover the $1,720 bill. But it would leave me with barely enough for next month's rent. And that was assuming the client I'd met with today came through. A prospect that suddenly felt hollow, as if even that success would never be enough. My phone buzzed again with a call from Ryan. I declined it, only for Melissa's name to appear moments later. I declined that too. Then came a text from my mother that I couldn't help but read. "When you're ready to be responsible, we'll be here." A laugh escaped me. A harsh broken sound in the quiet car. Responsible. Muscle memory taking me through familiar streets until I realized I was heading toward my childhood friend Allison Parker's apartment. Allison and I had been inseparable throughout high school, before I left for Chicago and she stayed in Milwaukee for nursing school. We'd remained close despite the distance, though our contact had become less frequent in recent years. The simple question broke the fragile composure I'd managed to rebuild. Fresh tears came as she pulled me inside, leading me to her couch where I collapsed, the bill falling from my pocket onto her coffee table. Between sobs, I explained what had happened. Allison listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled as I described the itemized statement, the interest charges, my siblings' complicity. When I finished, she handed me a tissue and picked up the bill, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. I don't even have words, Brooke. This is emotional manipulation, plain and simple. The worst part, I said, my voice hoarse from crying, is that I'm not even entirely surprised. Deep down, I think I've always known their love came with conditions. I just didn't realize they'd actually put a price tag on it. Allison hesitated. The revelation should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, completing a picture I'd been afraid to see clearly. How long? I asked. I never imagined they were keeping an actual ledger. I stared at the bill on the table, the neat rows of numbers that had reduced our relationship to a transaction. "What are you going to do?" Allison asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. A breaking point reached, but also a strange new clarity emerging from the pain. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to play by their rules anymore. I slept on Allison's couch that night. Their tone evolving from angry, "How dare you walk out like that?" to manipulative, "After everything we've done for you," to concerned, "We're worried about you." My father had called twice but left no messages. Ryan had sent a single text. "Way to ruin the anniversary." Melissa's messages were gentler but still missed the point. "They just want what's best for you." What's best for me? The phrase echoed in my mind as I showered and borrowed clean clothes from Allison. "I'm thinking it's time I stopped trying to earn their approval," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I need to confront this head-on." She looked concerned. "Are you sure that's wise? Maybe give it a few days, let things cool down." I shook my head. "If I wait, they'll control the narrative. They'll frame last night as me being emotional or irresponsible again. I need to address this on my terms." An hour later, I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' Tudor-style home in the affluent suburb where I'd grown up. Both their cars were in the driveway, my father's Mercedes and my mother's Range Rover, along with Ryan's Tesla. Of course they'd rallied the troops. My hand trembled slightly as I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing through the house I'd once called home. My mother answered, her expression shifting quickly from hope to caution when she saw my resolved face. "Brooke," she said, stepping back to let me in, "we were worried when you didn't come home last night." Home. As if their house was still my refuge rather than the headquarters of emotional accounting. "I stayed with Allison," I said, following her into the formal living room where, as expected, my father and Ryan waited. Melissa sat perched on the edge of an armchair, looking uncomfortable. "You caused quite a scene last night," my father said without preamble. "The maitre d' called this morning to check if everything was all right." Of course he was more concerned about appearances than my feelings. "I think a scene was warranted considering the circumstances," I replied. "I think it explains itself quite clearly." Ryan sighed dramatically. "This is exactly why we never discussed the arrangement with you. You're too emotional about money." "This isn't about money," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "This is about the fact that my own family has been keeping a secret ledger of everything they've ever done for me, with the expectation that I would eventually pay it all back, without ever telling me those were the terms." "We shouldn't have had to tell you," my father said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. "It's common sense that parents invest in their children's futures with the expectation that successful children will reciprocate." "Is that what you told Ryan and Melissa?" I asked. "Or did you make the terms clear to them from the beginning?" A telling silence fell over the room. Melissa looked down at her hands. "That's what I thought," I continued. "You knew they'd follow the paths you approved of, so you were comfortable being explicit about your expectations. But you knew I might refuse if the strings were attached up front. So you pretended there weren't any." "That's not true," my mother protested, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Dad, show me the ledger." My father stiffened. "What ledger?" "The one where you've been tracking every dollar spent on me since I turned 18. I know you have one. Meticulous record-keeping is your specialty, after all." His hesitation told me everything. After a moment, he stood and walked to his home office, returning with a leather-bound ledger book. He placed it on the coffee table without opening it. When he nodded reluctantly, I opened it. Inside, in my father's precise handwriting, was a detailed accounting of my life in dollars and cents. College tuition broken down by semester. The security deposit for my first apartment. The used car they'd helped me buy after graduation. Each entry included dates, amounts, and in a final column, repayment status. While Ryan and Melissa's pages I flipped to check showed regular repayments, mine showed a growing balance with no credits. "How long have you been planning to present me with this bill?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We weren't planning to," my mother started. "Last night wasn't spontaneous," I cut in. "That bill was prepared in advance, formatted and printed. You were waiting for the right moment. We were hoping we wouldn't need to take such drastic measures." my father admitted. That maybe if you'd supported my choices instead of constantly undermining them, I might have found success on my own terms. We have supported you, my mother insisted. That's exactly what all these expenses represent. That's not support, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Support isn't a transaction. Family isn't a business arrangement. Love isn't something you earn by paying back debts. Ryan scoffed. That's convenient, isn't it? You want all the benefits of family support with none of the responsibility. I turned to him, a strange calm settling over me as I finally saw the dynamic clearly. No, Ryan. I want what you've always had, the security of knowing you're valued for who you are, not what you can pay back. I want what Melissa has, parents who see her career choices as valid and worthy of real support, not conditional loans. That's not fair, Melissa said, speaking up for the first time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally, I would have ignored it during such an important confrontation, but something told me to check. It was an email from the tech company I'd met with yesterday. As I quickly scanned its contents, a strange laugh escaped me. What is it? My mother asked, frowning at my inappropriate response. It's the client I met with yesterday, the meeting that made me late to dinner. They're offering me a 1-year contract for their complete rebranding. The initial payment is $45,000. Ryan's eyebrows rose in what might have been genuine surprise. Well, my father said, his tone warming considerably, that changes things. With that kind of income, we could certainly arrange a more reasonable repayment schedule. Perhaps defer the current bill until... No, I interrupted, the clarity of the moment crystallizing into certainty. I'm not going to pay this bill. Not now, not ever. Brooke, be reasonable, my mother said, her voice taking on the cajoling tone she used when trying to guide me toward her preferred outcome. Now that your financial situation is improving, you can start meeting your obligations like your siblings have. That's just it, I said, closing the ledger and standing up straight. I don't recognize these as my obligations. I never agreed to these terms. You offered help under the guise of love and support, not as loans with expected repayment. So you're just going to take advantage of our generosity? Ryan asked incredulously. Your generosity? I repeated. Is it generous to secretly track every dollar spent on your child? Whose face paled at the last accusation. How did you, she began. It doesn't matter. I cut her off. What matters is that I finally see clearly what I've suspected for years. In this family, love is conditional. Support comes with strings. And I'm done trying to earn what should be freely given. I reached into my bag and pulled out my checkbook. With deliberate movements, I wrote out a check for $1,720 and placed it on top of the ledger. This is the last payment I'll ever make to you, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Not because I owe it, but because I need you to understand that I can't be bought or sold, not even by my own family. I walked toward the door, pausing when my mother called after me. Brooke, don't be ridiculous. Let's discuss this rationally. I turned back one last time. There's nothing rational about putting a price tag on family, Mom. When you figure that out, you know where to find me. As I walked out the door, I heard my father's voice. She'll be back when she needs something. It was exactly the wrong thing to say, and exactly what I needed to hear to know I was making the right choice. 2 months after walking out of my parents' house, my apartment in Chicago looked different. The stack of unpaid bills that had been a permanent fixture on my kitchen counter was gone. My ancient desktop computer had been replaced with a sleek new setup, purchased with the first installment of my tech company contract. But the most significant changes weren't visible. I moved around my space with a new sense of ownership, not just of the physical apartment, but of my choices, my career, and my life. The tech company project had expanded beyond the initial rebrand. They'd been so impressed with my work that they contracted me for their product launch campaign as well, adding another $20,000 to my fee. For the first time since going freelance, I had financial stability, but more importantly, I had emotional stability that no bank balance could provide. You sound different, Allison said during our weekly phone call. She'd become my lifeline during the painful transition away from my family. More confident. I feel different, I admitted, settling onto my couch with a cup of tea. It's like I've been carrying this weight my whole life without realizing it. This need to prove my worth to people who were measuring it with the wrong tools. Have you heard from them? She asked carefully. Ryan and Melissa have both texted, I said. Surface level stuff. How are you? And we should talk soon. Nothing that acknowledges what happened. And your parents? I sighed. Radio silence since I deposited that check. My mother sent a formal thank you note for the loan repayment, as if it had been a normal financial transaction between acquaintances. That's cold, Allison said. It's actually clarifying, I replied. It confirms everything I realized that night. My email notification chimed. A message from my therapist confirming our appointment for the following day. Finding Dr. Bennett had been Allison's suggestion, and in the 6 weeks since our first session, she'd helped me recognize patterns I'd been blind to my entire life. What you're describing is financial manipulation, she'd said in our second session. Using money as a tool of control is unfortunately common in families with resources. The parent-child relationship becomes transactional rather than nurturing. Those sessions had given me vocabulary for experiences I'd struggled to articulate. Terms like emotional blackmail, financial abuse, and conditional love. They'd helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't normal or healthy, despite being normalized within our family system. My phone buzzed with an email from my financial advisor. Another new addition to my life. After the confrontation with my family, I'd realized I needed to build financial literacy on my own terms. Jake Morales had been recommended by a fellow freelancer, and he'd patiently walked me through creating my first real budget, setting up an emergency fund, and planning for taxes on my new income. Financial independence is about more than just having money, he told me during our first meeting. It's about having control over your financial decisions and understanding the why behind them. Control. That word had resonated deeply. For years, I'd allowed my family's disapproval to make me feel perpetually insecure about my financial choices. Now I was learning to trust my own judgment. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my sister Melissa. Family dinner this Sunday? Mom's making lasagna. The invitation, so casual and devoid of context, made me laugh out loud. I opened my laptop and pulled up the draft of the letter I'd been working on for weeks. A letter to my family explaining my feelings and establishing boundaries for any future relationship. Dear, I'm writing to explain why I can't simply return to our previous family dynamic without acknowledgement of what happened and how it affected me. The letter continued for several pages. As I reread it, I realized I was finally ready to send it, not because I expected them to understand, but because I needed to articulate my truth regardless of how they received it. After attaching the letter to an email addressed to all 4 of them, I hesitated only briefly before clicking send. Then I texted Melissa. I can't make Sunday dinner. I've sent an email explaining why. I love you, but things need to change before I can be part of family gatherings again. Over the next week, the responses trickled in. Ryan didn't acknowledge the email at all. Melissa sent a brief text saying she was sorry I felt that way, but thought I was overreacting. My mother replied with a formal email that sidestepped every point I'd made while suggesting we move forward without dwelling on misunderstandings. But it was the certified letter that arrived 10 days later that truly confirmed I'd made the right decision. Inside the official envelope was a letter from my father's attorney, referencing an outstanding financial obligation, and suggesting we resolve this matter amicably before pursuing other avenues of collection. I should have been hurt. Instead, suddenly needing to hear a friendly voice. The funny thing is, it doesn't even hurt anymore. I told her when she picked up. It's like confirmation that I was right all along. So what will you do? She asked. I looked around my apartment, at the new computer purchased with money I'd earned, at the calendar marked with client meetings I'd secured through my own talent, at the framed print I'd bought myself as a celebration of my independence. I'm going to keep building my life, I said. On my terms, not theirs. And for the first time since that night at Morton's, I felt completely certain that I was on the right path. Not because anyone else approved of it, but because it was authentically mine. 1 year after the anniversary dinner that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment, arranging a bouquet of fresh flowers on the dining table. The space was smaller than my previous apartment, but in a better neighborhood, with large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light, perfect for my creative work. More importantly, it was entirely mine, chosen and furnished without input or financial assistance from my family. The tech company contract had turned into a permanent arrangement. I now served as their creative director on a consulting basis, with the freedom to take on other clients as well. My portfolio had expanded, my rates had increased, and for the first time in my career, I had the luxury of choosing projects based on interest rather than desperate need. Financial stability had brought other changes too. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for years had receded. I slept better. I created better work. I built stronger relationships, no longer distracted by the fear of failing to meet impossible standards. When my phone rang that morning, I smiled at the caller ID. Jared Coleman, the lawyer friend who had helped me respond to my father's legal threats. "Just checking in," he said when I answered. "Any more letters from the family attorney?" "Not since you sent that response 3 months ago," I said, adjusting the flowers. "I think they finally got the message that gift-giving doesn't create legally enforceable debt." Jared had volunteered his services pro bono after hearing my story through our mutual friend Allison. His firmly worded letter explaining the legal distinction between gifts and loans, combined with a gentle reminder about potential harassment claims, had apparently been enough to end the collection attempts. "Good," he said, "though I'm almost disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing their faces if we actually had to go to court." I laughed. "Trust me, it's better this way. The less contact, the healthier I feel." After we hung up, I returned to preparing for the evening ahead. It was Thanksgiving, my first holiday hosting my own celebration. The turkey was already in the oven, filling the apartment with mouth-watering aromas. Sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, and pumpkin pie would round out the traditional menu, though I'd added my own twist with a signature cocktail and appetizers inspired by my favorite Chicago restaurants. At precisely 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Allison arrived first. The painful separation from my biological family had created space for these authentic connections to flourish. In losing what I thought was irreplaceable, I discovered something more valuable. Puzzled, all my guests had arrived. I excused myself to answer it. Standing in the hallway, looking uncertain and slightly disheveled, was my sister Melissa. "Hi," she said softly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." For a moment I couldn't speak, shock freezing me in place. It had been months since our last text exchange, which had ended with her defending our parents' perspective yet again. "We're just finishing dinner," I finally managed. "What are you doing here? How did you even know my address?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Allison told me." "Don't be mad at her," I practically begged her. I needed to see you." From the dining room came the sounds of my friends chatting and laughing. "Because I finally understand what you were trying to tell us. At least I think I do." She held up her left hand, which I now noticed was missing the engagement ring she'd worn for the past 2 years. "Mark and I broke up. Or rather, I broke up with him." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, though I'd never particularly liked her fiancé, who had always seemed like a younger version of our father. "Don't be," she said with a sad smile. "It was the right decision. I realized I was marrying him for the same reason I chose my career, to meet expectations, not because it made me happy." She hesitated. "After you left, things changed. Part of me wanted to embrace her, to welcome her into the healing I'd found over the past year. Another part remained wary, remembering how she'd stood by while our parents had reduced our relationship to a balance sheet. "Would you like to come in?" I finally offered. "We're about to have dessert. There's plenty." Relief washed over her face. "I'd like that if your friends don't mind." "They're good people," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. "They understand complicated family dynamics." As we walked toward the dining room, she paused. "Brooke, I don't expect everything to be fixed with one conversation. I know I've got a lot to make up for, but I'm starting to question everything I thought I knew about success, family obligation. All of it. And you're the only person I know who's had the courage to define those things for yourself." I warned her. "Redefining yourself outside of their expectations. But it's worth it." "I can see that," she said, glancing toward the dining room where my friends waited. You seem free. The word resonated deeply. Free. That's exactly what I was, free from the ledger, free from the crushing weight of conditional approval, free to define success on my own terms. As I introduced Melissa to my chosen family, watching her slowly relax among people who had no preconceptions about her, I reflected on everything the past year had taught me. Family could be a beautiful gift, but only when given freely, without expectation of return. Love measured in dollars and cents wasn't love at all. Thank you for letting me in tonight, she said. I know you had every right to turn me away. That's not how family should work, I replied. Real family doesn't keep score. I'm learning that, she said with a small smile. Slowly, as I paid for dinner for my friends that night, picking up the check without hesitation or anxiety, I silently reaffirmed the most important lesson of all. Some things you give freely with no expectation of return. That's what I learned family should be. Perhaps someday my parents would understand that too. But whether they did or not, I had found my worth beyond their balance sheet. And that was a freedom no amount of money could buy. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Your value isn't determined by anyone's ledger but your own. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family over money or expectations? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that remind us all that true worth can't be calculated in dollars and cents. Thank you for listening, and remember, family should be about love, not ledgers.